Welcome to 90 Degree Turns. I'm your host, Trisha Margus. Allow me to guide you into your own endless soul expansion as we connect to your heart, discover balance, awaken to healing, and embody your soul's deepest expression. For those of you hungry to expand your minds, beliefs, and perspectives, welcome home. Xane Daniel is a Hathor Energy Healer, accomplished publisher, and captivating speaker. He teaches people how to remove negative entities, possessions, implants, curses, and chords by raising their vibrational frequency, retuning the subconscious mind, overcoming childhood traumas and blockages, and helping them step into their own power. His graphic novel series, Righteous, and his unique modality, Soul Essence Activation, are both powerful catalysts for enlightenment for readers and clients alike. After an ayahuasca experience in 2013 shifted his focus from video game production to spirituality, Xane discovered his connection to numerous extra-dimensional collectives, spirits, and other entities, including the Hathors, the Ancients, the spirit of Ayahuasca, the Arcturians, and the Andromedans. Using his soul essence activation process for audiences and individuals, Xane incorporates intention and sound harmonics to bring the soul's essence to the surface. His unique modality clears mental and emotional blocks, crystallizes DNA, and raises the vibrational frequency of participants. Xane is the founder and director of the Higher Self Expo, the writer and publisher for Righteous, the content director for Cosmic TV, and he teaches people how to remove their negative entities in his course, Detached. Hey everyone, welcome to 90 Degree Turns. I'm your host, Trisha. We are joined in episode 35 with Xane Daniel. Xane, how are you this evening?
I am amazing. How are you?
I'm doing great. I am very excited about our conversation tonight.
Me too.
I read a bit about your bio and everything, and you've mentioned that you're a Hathor Energy Healer. Right?
Yes.
So I would love to kind of just dive right into it and understand, is this in relation to the Hathor beings? How did you come about this kind of energy healing modality that you have?
Absolutely. Okay. So starting right off with the Hathors are an extra dimensional collective, just like the Pleiadians or the Arcturians. And they were incarnated here on Earth during Egypt's golden age. And I was incarnated among them. And that's where I learned how to do my main modality, which is the soul essence activation. So if you look behind me right here, this is the goddess Hathor actually over my shoulder. The goddess Hathor is 50% male, 50% female. So a bull's head over a female's body. And she's one of the leading or most powerful gods in the Egyptian deity history. So it's an amazing experience to be able to work with these beings because they are represented by these incredible large beings of light. And whenever I've spoken and worked in front of an audience, invariably people will come up to me and say, wow, you were surrounded by these amazing light beings, or they were all among us at the time. And if you know Tom Kenyon, he's probably the most famous Hathor channel. So the Hathors love to use sound and vocal tones as part of the healing modality. And so what I hear in my head is a tone that I'll hit during the healing modality at times. Sometimes we don't do audio tones. Sometimes they have me just do an explosive sound, and that sound is the signal or the moment that the energy is transferred from them through me to whoever is participating, whether it be a large audience or an individual. So the main modality, the soul essence activation, is I'm bringing the best versions of your past incarnations forward into your current one, especially as it relates to your life's purpose. But it's so much more than that too, because emotions are a major part of what I do. So if anybody is experiencing a very negative emotion at any one time, then I can do an activation that will change the frequency at which you are tuning into to feel that emotion. So let's say that you're feeling a great deal of fear. So all emotions are just frequencies, and your body, your energy body, tunes into the appropriate frequency for the situation. The problem is that sometimes we tune into the inappropriate frequency, one that carries with it information as to really panic or have a very high emotional response. And so these retuning activations actually tune the body to a much more manageable version of that emotion. And that affords the person the ability to now go ahead and say, oh, well, wait a minute. Maybe I don't need to be so angry at this moment or so fearful or whatever the emotion is. Maybe I can learn something from this. Maybe something positive will come from this. And that I've found to be extremely powerful and just one of the many tools that we use when we're working with people who have negative entity attachments or who have childhood traumas, PTSD, depression, any number of different things that they would really like to get over. So that is kind of a quick version of my relationship with the Hathors and what they really allow me to do.
Awesome. It's a great way to start the episode. So then you were mentioning about how there's childhood trauma, right? And entity attachments. Is there a relational like cause and effect when someone has childhood trauma to the amount of entities that they'll have further on in life or unbeknownst to them that they already have acquired? On top of that, then does that relate to then their darker emotions, right? If someone's depressed or in like a really just like angry space, well, how does that all relate to one another?
Right. Well, there is definitely a correlation. It's not necessarily about the number of entities, but it's like the likelihood. But we've got to step all the way back and say, first of all, why does someone have a negative entity? Yes, they might have a negative entity as a result or as a way to get over childhood traumas, and I'll explain that in a minute. But we all signed our soul contracts. We all came here to have an awakening experience, to discover what our spiritual gifts are, to discover what our mission is. And so let's say that you're deciding before you're born, your soul is looking at the list. Okay, well, what are the ways that I could wake up in this existence? Oh, it could be a near-death experience. Oh, it could be a plant medicine experience. Oh, it could be a death of someone that's near and dear to me, or any number of things. And on that list is negative entity attachments. Okay, if I go ahead and sign up for negative entity attachments in this life, then what's most likely going to happen is I'm going to find or try to find a way to remove them. And that process will lead me down an awakening journey. So that's the way that I really look at it. Yes, the negative entities, now that what they do is they're attaching to your frequency. So if you've had childhood traumas or any number of blockages or whatever you might have, even traumatic experience in your adult life, then those sorts of things will lower your frequency and make you a very nice, attractive match to a negative entity. So part of the process of removing a negative entity, among other things, is getting over those childhood traumas or handling that sort of maybe even negative thinking or overthinking. And that is of course the beginning of an enlightenment, an awakening experience. So it's just another method that we can use to help people wake up.
So when you say that there's going to be like people have darker thoughts, right? Is that a direct cause of an entity, or does it just bring entities to oneself? Like, is it what, I guess, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Is it the
Right.
trauma? Is it the entity? Is it a combination of both? How can one discern if it's, where should someone start if they have these dark thoughts or feelings and they just can't seem to shake it?
Entities are a symptom of a different problem, of a bigger problem. So overall, I mean, every once in a while we get kind of the opposite of that, but most of the time, 98% of the time, the entity is just like I said, a symptom. The larger problem might be the childhood trauma. The larger problem might be the overthinking. The larger problem might be not loving yourself unconditionally or believing that the world is evil or whatever it is that's in the way of that, again, that awakening process. So the entity hardly ever causes those problems. However, if let's say you've decided in your soul contract, yes, I want an entity, and you've had childhood trauma, which you also, of course, decided in your soul contract, then you're more likely to get that entity. And then when you do, then the entity may cause you to have negative thinking. You might start to go, gosh, why can't I get rid of this thing? What am I not doing right? Why do I deserve this? I'm frustrated because it won't go away. I'm impatient because it won't go away. I fear that it'll never go away. I must not be good enough, and so it won't go away. So it can cause more problems that then have to be resolved. But ultimately, the core is the soul contract. The soul contract, really, we can end the sentence there, right? The soul contract is going to dictate what traumas, what sort of situation, and then what the solution is. And like I said, it's an ass backwards way to say, wait a minute, negative entities are a solution to childhood trauma. It is when you finally say, you know what, I need to get rid of this negative entity. What do I do? And people end up coming to me very often for that. And so, like I said, it's a lot of different things that we do. But one of the first things that we have to do is take a look at that childhood trauma, take a look to see what it might be, or even past life trauma, to see what it might be that's causing them to stick so closely to you, and then begin by giving them tools on handling that, on getting over that, on managing their emotions, on realizing how the 3D brain works, because the 3D brain causes a lot of problems too. That overthinking experience is all about the survival brain trying to figure out what's wrong, as opposed to being in a divine place and allowing yourself to essentially ascend.
Very, very well said. So all this talk about entities and attachments, what prompted your discovery initially of entity attachments? Were you always aware of this, or did something kind of suddenly happen to you, or was it more like a gradual awakening? Because we all have different stories. So what was your journey?
Oh, yeah. So entities were not a part of my original awakening journey whatsoever. I like to say it that I was raised by scientists, or at least science believing a family. So they really instilled in me this kind of, this is one time around. We're going to just live this life and we're going to turn to dirt. And so we better enjoy it and better get the best out of it we possibly can. And here's how the universe works from a scientific perspective. So that was my religion. That was the closest I came to religion. So I was very closed off to all of this. I was closed off to institutional religions, and I was closed off to New Age spirituality and psychics and all of that. So it really took something big. So remember, I was talking about that awakening list, right? On my awakening list was a plant medicine experience, and the plant medicine that I essentially chose me was ayahuasca. And when I had that ayahuasca experience, it started immediately, and I could hear a voice, and I knew instantly that it was the voice of universal knowledge. And that voice started teaching me about how the world works from the New Age spirituality perspective. And as soon as it started, I took all of my science knowledge and I said, nope, because science can't explain that, or at least it hasn't been able to yet. Because I also say that spirituality is just science that science hasn't figured out yet. So we're eventually going to understand it all, but we're held back a little bit by every scientific explanation has to be 100% reproducible. If there's a 1% chance that it's not true, then science doesn't buy it. So, that slows down the discovery and understanding process. But ultimately, that spirituality approach was amazing, how quickly for me that I was able to just take all that science knowledge and get rid of it and be a child. I got to be a child that was exploring an all new world. I was 40 at the time of my awakening. So I had 40 years of believing one particular way. And then to just instantly change it was a really exciting experience. And so even still today, I'm in constant discovery mode and wonder as new things present themselves to me, and I experience people using amazing spiritual gifts or new ones develop for myself. And And I think that if we approach all of it with that joy and that open-mindedness and that childlike discovery and wonder, then the possibilities are really quite endless. But if we enter into it saying, I'm having the dark night of the soul and everything's kind of miserable and I don't know if I'm ever going to get over it, that's still bringing your 3D experience with you into a spiritual awakening, which will just slow down the process. There's nothing wrong with it, because there's really nothing wrong with anything. Everything is happening exactly as it's supposed to, but it can go a little bit smoother if you approach it with that joy instead.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree there. So the joy that everyone is looking for, especially if like in the spiritual community, there's a lot of people who kind of exuberate an excessive amount of joy where it's isn't always grounded in reality, right? And they spiritually
Right.
bypass so many different things in their life because they're like, oh, if I just stay positive, it's going to all be okay, which on some level, yes, but also there are lessons to be learned, right?
Mhm.
What would you say to someone that is trying to see only the positive in life because they don't want to, they're too scared, they don't want to bring like potentially more negative things to their life? What kind of advice do you have for someone?
I
Um,
would really, I love this question, and I would really go with why is there positive and why is there negative in the first place? What does positive and negative actually mean? Because when you look at the universe from the perspective of ourselves as the creator, then why would we ever judge anything? Judgment comes from a three-dimensional perspective. Judgment comes from trying to survive in a difficult time, trying to make sure that your tribe doesn't oust you, or trying to make sure that that all the members of the tribe do their job. And we say, oh, you're not picking enough berries, you need to pick more berries. Like, that's judgment, and then we're going to carry that out, and it's going to have 3D physical ramifications. So that judgment perspective is very much a 3D perspective. But if we step way back and we look at the universe from that creator perspective, then there is no bad or good, there is no good or evil, it just is. And so which way do we want to look at it? Do we want to look at it as everything's just peachy keen and nothing's ever going to go wrong, or do we want to say, actually, everything is happening exactly as it's supposed to? And for some people, from their perspective, it's very bad. Or for some people, from their perspective, it's very good. All perspectives are valid, and all experiences are valid source experiences. We are essentially source. We've come here forgetting that we're source so that we can be one of these 3D beings and explore what it feels like to explore your own creation, your creation of the universe from a limited perspective. From limitation, we can see things that we are unable to see when we are source, or when we are the creator. When we're the creator, we know that we're infinite and we know that we cannot die. But when we come here as these 3D beings, we go, oh my gosh, I've got to take this world seriously because I could die, bad things could happen, good things can happen. And so that motivates us to take action and interact with our world. If we didn't, then we might just sit back and go, well, it doesn't really matter, because it doesn't matter if I live or if I die, who cares? And so it would be a very different experience. So it's incredibly important to have a human experience. That's why you're here. Whether it's good or whether it's bad is totally the judgment of the individual. So I like to look at it like everything does happen exactly as it's supposed to. And whether it's bad, in my case, say, I might have a bad experience, but I'm going to be able to look back at that bad experience a week or a month from now and say, you know what? I learned a lot from that experience. So I'm actually kind of glad that it happened. And we can find that to be true on every single experience that we have. There is always a lesson. There is always something beautiful that comes from it. So in a way, I might be a little bit of that spiritual bypassing, but I don't think so, because I do accept everything as valid experience.
Yes. Yes. Because, like you said, everything that happens to us is something we can learn from, independent of how long it takes us to realize that we've learned something from it. There is valuable nuggets that we can take from it.
Yeah.
Yes, very, very much so. I agree. I'd like to pick your brain a little bit, because you were talking about how ayahuasca was something that helped you awaken and you saw the world in an entirely different way. When sometimes I've heard people talk about different kinds of substances, especially ones that are like ayahuasca and hallucinogenic in nature. And they say that you got to be careful because those substances can sometimes open portals, if you're not ready, to other entities coming around you, right? It's kind of like if someone drinks a lot or does drugs a lot, like all these, an excess of anything will kind of bring that frequency attachment to you, right? So what is your thought process on using substances in a responsible way, or in whatever way you use them, right? And in spiritual awakening, does it have a place, or what are your thoughts?
Right. Okay. Yeah, this is a fun topic. Well, if we step back to what I was just saying, every experience is valid. So I'm not going to poo poo anybody's idea. If they want to do it irresponsibly, they can go ahead and do it and have that human experience, or they can do it responsibly and have that human experience. So the responsible approach, of course, is to work with a shaman. The shamans that are out there, they do all this ritual and all this very specific approach to administering something like ayahuasca. Why do they do that? They don't do it just to show and just to make a performance. They do it for a very specific reason. And it's to make sure that the frequency, the vibration of the experience and of all the participants is very high. Because yes, we're going to open a portal with ayahuasca. What's going to be on the other side? A vibrational match to you. So if you are at a very low place and you don't have the protection, I don't like the word protection, but the environment, the environment created by the shaman that will make sure that the frequency is high, then yeah, what you may encounter is a lower frequency being. And so at the same time, if we go back to the soul contract thing, if that happens, you planned for it in the first place. So now it's your mission, your experience to handle that negative experience or that negative entity. So in short or in long, whichever way you want to look at it, I don't have any problem with, obviously, with experiences like plant medicines as being an opportunity for you to have an awakening experience. I know that there are some out there who say that's cheating, you should do it through meditation, that's a shortcut, that sort of thing. But again, do we say that about the person who had that near-death experience, who died in the traffic accident or died on the table and raised above their body and saw everything and realized that they were spiritual beings and then were resuscitated and go on with life? No, of course not. We never say that that was cheating. We say that that was ordained or that was a divine experience. Well, why isn't plant medicine? It's the exact same thing. It's just checking a different box.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you mentioned also about meditation. So in your experience, I'm very curious to see then the awakening that you had through ayahuasca. Did you already meditate before you took that? Or was the meditation first? Because my experience when I first tried like ayahuasca, it gave me a completely different vision of how things are going. So when I tried to meditate, I expected a similar result. And it was very difficult to get to that same place where I was just at through a substance, right? Naturally. And I was always, for a while, I had been trying to get to the same visual like frequency and the vibrancy and the colors, right? So what has been your experience?
Well, in that case, what you were doing there is you had an expectation. You had an expectation that you could achieve that same thing through meditation. And while that's a fine expectation, our expectations are hardly ever met. So going at it with, whatever is presented to me is what I'm supposed to experience. And that includes nothing. So that you don't get discouraged, you don't get disappointed, you don't give up. Instead, it's all about, well, if you look at it as that everything happens for us rather than to us, then we're always constantly able to say, oh, that was an interesting experience. I didn't have anything happen during my meditation. I wonder what lesson I'm supposed to learn from not having any result. If we look at it in that way, whether you try to search and find the lesson or not, then you've opened yourself up to the possibility. That's essentially what meditation is. It's acceptance. It's a practice of acceptance. Oh, I have errant thoughts. Darn it, why am I thinking all the time? that's not acceptance. If you say, oh, there's an errant thought. Okay, that was a cool thought. Oh, I might even interrupt my meditation and write it down so I don't forget. Thank you. Moving back to meditation. So that it is an acceptance practice. And so, yeah, if you're pursuing the same exact ayahuasca experience, then that's what's going to happen. You're going to be disappointed because your expectations might not be met. For me, it was so amazing to have the ayahuasca experience. And no, I didn't meditate really beforehand. I had tried some, but I didn't really get anything out of it. And now, after that happened, it opened my channel. So I was immediately speaking to the Hathors and the Arcturians and so on. So now when I meditate, I can just simply have conversations with these beings. And the way that I hear the response is just words in my head. Every once in a while, it'll be a visual. Every once in a while, it'll just be me suddenly knowing something. And so for anybody who is trying to talk to their guides or to the ascended masters or whoever, one of the things that I have to remind people is that sometimes you'll ask a question that you have no idea what the answer is. And then as soon as you ask it, you'll instantly go, well, duh, I already know the answer to that. Well, that's because you just downloaded it. You didn't know before, and all of a sudden you just know, and you think, why did I even bother asking? You just received the answer. So it comes in so many ways. You really have to be open to whatever that might be. And for some, it might be after the meditation's all done, they receive the answer 24, 48, a week later, instead of during the meditation. So again, it's a practice of acceptance.
That is the key, right, in this world. Without
Yes.
acceptance, there's a lot
Yes.
more difficulty in going against the grain.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I would like to talk about then something like possession, right? Like, is it a real thing? Have you seen it? Has it been experienced? How does that happen? Because it seems from like, well, at least what they show in Hollywood, right? It's a very intense experience where it seems like the person who is there is the original soul that's there. It's kind of stepped aside and something has completely overtaken a person. So what are your thoughts on that? Because I'm sure you have some perspective on it.
Oh yeah, I've definitely seen it, and it comes in. It doesn't happen. I don't see it that often where the person is actually being controlled. It does happen on occasion, but most of the time it's just so prominent that they can't even have normal thoughts because they are constantly bombarded by voices that are telling them things. So ultimately, it still falls into the same category of, okay, where do we have to go to this? Oh, we really have to go to this childhood trauma or to this adulthood abuse situation or whatever. And it ends up really truly being the same thing. One of the things that I tell people all the time is it's not about the entity, it's about you. The entity is just a symptom. The entity is there to tell you to do something. And people all the time will come to me and they'll say, hey, somebody, I don't know how to do that. And so that's what we're there to do, is to help teach them how to step into their power, teach them how to raise their frequency, teach them how to corral the mind and to look at everything in that everything just is sort of way, like I was talking about earlier. And that takes a lot of practice, and that takes a lot of direction. For some people it comes very naturally, and it's not too difficult. But again, the possession thing, a lot of times the other aspect of this is that people will say, okay, what type of entity do I have? Is it a demon? I find that to be fascinating because what they're doing there is essentially it's the mind, it's the 3D mind trying to solve the problem. It's actually a pursuit of pleasure or a pursuit of comfort. So, oh, if I know what type of entity it is, maybe it won't be so scary, or maybe I'll be able to get over it. But what if you find out that you do have a demon? In that case, what you're thinking is, oh my gosh, demons are more powerful than souls. What chance do I have? And the fear skyrockets, and there's no chance of getting out of it. So in most cases, when somebody asks me what kind of entity they have, I laugh and say, I don't care, because what matters is them. It's not about the entity. And the more that we focus on the entity, the more power we give it. We have all the power over our own energy field. We have all the domain over that. And the only way something else has it is if we give it away. And now I can hear people right now saying, well, yeah, but I didn't give it away. I don't want this thing. Well, but when you fear it, you give it power. When you're frustrated by it, you give it power, and so on and so forth. So it's all about the individual, whether it's the worst possible possession sort of experience, or it's just a minor voice experience. It doesn't matter. It's all about the individual.
Yeah, definitely. Can we go into then about implants? How do implants come about, as well as the importance of cord cutting? Because I feel like those are topics that are often spoken about, and they're really, really pivotal as like a fundamental understanding of our energy bodies and what we need to be aware of being a physical body and a spiritual being.
Yeah. So there are positive implants and there are negative implants. I have definitely had positive implants that help me communicate with the extra dimensional beings that I communicate with. But the negative implants, really, it kind of falls into the same category as a negative entity, whether they're physical or whether they're energetic. In a way, it doesn't matter. Let me give you an example and a story. On my YouTube channel, about a year ago, I released a video that was removing your alien implant. And so I was thinking about it ahead of time, going, how am I going to remove somebody's negative alien implant in a YouTube video? Because that's what my YouTube videos are all about. You watch the video and you have the effect of whatever it is that I'm talking about, because I'm using activations that you can watch in the video. So when I did the alien implant video, I said, all right, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to negotiate with the implants, actually the aliens who did the implant. I'm going to tell them that their experiment was a complete success. They got everything that they needed to out of it, and they no longer need the implant to be in the person, so they can come at their earliest convenience to remove it, especially if it's a physical one. So I did 2 activations like that. And if you go to that YouTube video, you can read through the comments and you'll see people saying, you're never going to believe this. 48 hours after I watched this video, there were giant lights that came on in the middle of the night. And all of a sudden there was all this commotion, and now my implant's gone. So it worked. They actually came and removed it. So it doesn't have to be that you need a scalpel to remove an actual physical implant. There can be other approaches and other ways to handle that situation. And it's also interesting because I don't really dive into implants as much as I do entities, but there's no difference. When it comes to it, it's still the individual. It's not about the implant, it's about you. It's not about the entity, it's about you. What do you need to do in order to get rid of this, or to make this change in your life, this positive change? Because that's again what we're here for. Is we're here to awaken, to discover our gifts, to discover our mission. The cord cutting is another one, and it falls into the same category of who has more control over your energy field, you or someone who's trying to create a cord, to curse you. Or if you have a cord, an inadvertent cord with a family member or an ex, when you know, KNOW, when you absolutely know that you are more powerful than the cord, than the entity, than the implant, then it doesn't matter. And you can walk around with a great deal of confidence. People will often talk to people about having a protective bubble around them. Put up that energy bubble every day before you go outside, because you never know when an entity or some sort of thing is going to latch itself onto you. Well, I do not endorse that approach at all. And the main reason is because it's a fear-based action. If you have to put a bubble of protection around yourself, then you're going to walk around very worried and very scared that things are going to jump out and grab you. Instead, if you walk around with confidence, knowing for a fact that you have power over your energy field, if you have domain over yourself, then you're going to walk around, you're going to strut around with confidence, knowing that nothing's ever going to harm you. This is the approach that makes it so that you don't have to keep going back to shaman and light workers to remove your entity for you. Because for many people, they approach it in a very 3D way. You go to a doctor to get healed. You go to church to hear the word of God. But instead, and so they say, oh, I've got to go to a shaman to have him remove my negative entity. Well, what if a week later the entity just comes back? Do you have to keep going back to the shaman or to the light worker who did it? We see this all the time, and people spend tens of thousands of dollars on entity maintenance. So I teach a program to actually teach people how to remove them themselves and how to make it so that they never have to worry about it again. And they don't have to use energy bubble protection at all. They just know how powerful they are. And they know that there is no chance that an entity, that an implant, that a cord is ever going to be a problem.
So what are some examples then, maybe you can give just a few of them, of if someone is having some kind of entity attachment? Like, is there some telltale signs? Because I mean, I feel like often many people will just say, oh, I must have an entity, my life is just going really dark and shitty, and sometimes that is the case, right? Other times
Sure.
it's not. So like, are there some telltale signs that you can be like, okay, if you have like 1, 2, and 3, then you most likely might have something that you have to deal with? I mean, either way, it ends up coming back down to what you're doing in your life and where you're going. But what are some telltale signs?
Well, it's kind of funny because I have a YouTube video that is like the 17 signs that you have a negative entity attachment. It happens to be my most popular video on YouTube. But what's the funny part about that is that for every single person, it's completely different. There's almost no overlap. I mean, there is, but at the same time, one person's experience can have no overlap with absolutely anyone else's. So again, it's not so important what it is. Yes, it could be an entity, and so we should do something about it. But it could be not an entity. Well, we can still do something about it. And the approach is exactly the same. It is about stepping into your power and taking charge of your energy field and so on and so forth, like I've been saying. So in a way, it kind of doesn't matter. And once again, by trying to figure out if you have an entity or not actually gives the entity more power. Or if you didn't have one and you're all worried about whether you have one, you might attract one. So it's an interesting chicken and egg sort of situation. But all that said, there are some common experiences. Most certainly the feeling of a presence when there's nobody else around. A hearing of voices. Absolutely, we can either hear them as almost silent whispers to very loud yelling, anything in between. A cloudy mind is a very common experience, that there's this brain fog that people report all the time. Also, they tend to give us the most trouble when we're trying to sleep. So if we're having incessant nightmares, especially if it's kind of over the same thing over and over again, that can often be an indicator of a negative entity, or just sleeping issues. Now, sleep paralysis often comes up as something that people experience and they say, oh, that's a negative entity. That's not always the case, because a sleep paralysis experience can actually be positive entities coming to give you a positive implant. So you don't want to jump to the conclusion that sleep paralysis is necessarily a bad thing. And if you do, then what are you doing? You're going into fear and you're lowering your frequency and you're making yourself a vibrational match for something that you do not want. So when it comes to sleep paralysis, I tell people, be excited, enjoy this, because it's probably something amazing that's coming to you. And if you are like some people who see some darkness, some dark shadow or something like that, to really question whether it's really that bad or if it's just your fear of the situation. So that's really the way that I look at it. And any other, those are kind of the major big symptoms that people report that have the most overlap, I would say.
Right. It's very interesting that you bring up sleep paralysis, because I have heard people talk about that, and how usually it's a quite a, from their interpretation, it's a scary experience because they can't like move, but then they see this like being on the in the corner or wherever on them. Like it's just very I've not experienced it, but I like that the perspective will still hold true, that if you look at it from the mindset that this isn't going to be something that harms you, that it will,
It won't.
it won't. Yeah, it
Yeah,
will
right.
not do
Yeah,
what you're thinking.
I've had 3 sleep paralysis experiences, and all of them have been amazing. But I would say that the very first one had a scary element to it. But luckily I had heard something about sleep paralysis, and that it's some sort of positive experience. It's a being that's coming to give you an implant that's going to help you. So I just assumed that's what it was. I didn't even question it, and I was excited that it was there. And for me, it felt like there was some sort of little creature that walked across my bed. I was laying on my stomach, so I couldn't see very well what it might have been. And I felt something kind of unzip my back, as though I had a zipper on my back. And then it just started taking things and throwing my insides around the room, is what it felt like. And I just went, wow, this is so cool. I wonder what this is all about. And then shortly thereafter, it went away. Then I kind of sat up and just went, oh my gosh, this world is absolutely amazing. And I said, I want to explore the universe. And as soon as I said, I want to explore the universe, this wave of bliss washed over me. And I kind of chuckled and I said, I want to explore the universe. And then another wave of bliss came over, and I just kind of kept saying that. And it was reinforcement that what had happened to me was something beautiful, and that I didn't need to worry at all. And it's kind of funny, because each of the other 2 sleep paralysis experiences that I had ended in almost exactly the same way. There was something that I had a thought about, and then I had that blissful experience. So it was as though I were receiving positive reinforcement for having those positive thoughts, that almost somebody patting me on the head and saying, it's okay, everything was okay. And that was very reassuring. So I encourage anybody who has sleep paralysis to change the way that you look at it, and to look at it as something beautiful, and try to step aside from fear, and you might be amazed and surprised at what happens.
And I think it's a very unique perspective to bring about, because I feel like the majority of people, when they think about or talk about sleep paralysis, is the exact opposite, So to hear that you have your own personal story that you can share like that, that's definitely a powerful moment. So for our audience, if anyone has anything about that, then you can definitely check out Xane's channel. So Xane, I want to know then, if I love the positivity that you exude. And I would love to know then about the comic books that you have. Has all of this positivity, has it become instilled into your comic books? Are they for children? Are they for adults? How did that inspiration come about?
Oh gosh, so that inspiration came about because I was excited about the transformation of the world. I was saying, okay, we are going to go toward a utopian society. I'm not sure how long it's going to take, what that process is going to be. But I was thinking about it from the perspective of, what if the world all of a sudden woke up one morning, the same day, at the same moment, and just said, all I want to do is help others. All I want to do is help others. I don't need to worry about my own food. I don't need to worry about my own survival. What can I do today to help everybody? And I started writing a story like that. But the problem was, it got really boring really fast, because there was no conflict. Everybody just got up and went, oh, we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and we're going to pick up all the trash, and we're going to help all the homeless, and we're going to do all the stuff. And so everything was fixed, and we had a utopian society within 6 months. So it was a great story from that perspective, but it wasn't a compelling story. So I thought, okay, how else could I represent this? Let's assume that it's just one person. One person wakes up with the idea that all they want to do is help others. And of course, I chose a character who is very selfish, so that transformation would be instantaneous and very obvious. So the other twist to the story, though, is that every time he helps someone, they felt the same way, or they feel the same way. So it's almost like a pay it forward sort of situation, or hysterically, it's more like a pandemic, where he went around and every person he helped felt the same way. So they started helping and they spread it to the next person and to the next person and to the next. So it's a way of spreading enlightenment to the masses through one or two or 10 or an entire life dedicated to helping others. So the story takes us through that process and the resistance that society has to it and the excitement that the people that are being, for lack of a better word, infected with this love for helping others.
The service of self versus service to others is a core thing that I feel like many people end up discovering, that they are either of service to self or service to others, right? And we try and find a balance where we could either do both and or just do one or the other, you know. I think it's a very like human thing to have to go through. So it's awesome. And what is the comic book called?
So the comic book's called Righteous. It really is written for an adult. I know you asked that, although I have like a teenage audience that likes it as well, because it's a lot about kind of like the corporate world, because our main character lives in that corporate world and then discovers that, okay, helping others is not going to, earn his salary. As a matter of fact, he's going to lose his job and he's going to lose his wife and he's going to lose his house because everybody's confused by his behavior, and his behavior does not resonate with the corporate approach to life. So he really goes through a very difficult time before he discovers that, hey, actually, this is kind of amazing, and I can see a path toward an incredibly bright future. So the comic book is called Righteous, and you can find it online at righteouscomic.com.
And I love that the storyline about it is that the more that he helps others, it spreads to other people, right? Because that's exactly how our energy works, right? When you give and when you're able to receive it, it spreads. Everyone's able to feel that on a level that is beyond just being a physical body, right? So it's a beautiful message. And so then tell me about this Cosmic TV as well. I believe it's a conscious streaming platform. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. So Cosmic Television has already been in existence for a few years under the name Awoken TV. And it was recently name changed, and then I recently took over it. So we're right now in the process of finding content creators for our fall season. And really, it's kind of the first season, the first official season of this streaming channel. So this is actually one of the first times I've gotten to talk about it. So I'm excited to do so. We have over 40 content creators, and we're starting to get some pretty big, some medium sized to big names that are signing up to be a part of it. So we're very excited about that. And it's, like you said, it's a streaming service. It's going to be on Roku. Actually, it's already on Roku, Amazon Fire. It's on Android, so as an app, as well as Apple iOS for your tablets as an app, and of course on the website. So people ask me, okay, so what is this, and how does it differ from something else that's out there? Here's the way that I like to describe it. What we're doing is we're going to take modern entertainment, things that you would see on the mass market. So maybe you'd see a game show or a reality show or a cooking show. And let's take that, because it's a great format and people are very familiar with it. They really like it. People come home from work and they would just want to veg out and watch something. Well, why don't we take those formats and that approach and merge it with spirituality? So wouldn't it be fun to see a reality show about a retreat where people transform, or a game show about who wants to be an ascended master or something like that? So what we're doing is we're taking that entertainment and we're adding inspiration. So what we want is for this to be the new mainstream entertainment type, rather than turning on Netflix or turning on Hulu or whatever and watching people murder each other or try to solve murders or whatever lower vibrational entertainment that's out there. I really, really want to take the entertainment and merge it with this incredible, inspiring spiritual mindset and approach to life, and create something that everybody gets excited about coming home from work and watching on their TV.
Awesome. And when you said that it's already out and available? Is
It
it?
is out and available. The amount of content on there is very small. So this was, like I said, run for a couple of years, and we're still kind of curating what was there, and we're removing some things because our approach is very much, you know what, any topic is on the table. We can talk about absolutely anything, except we cannot talk about it in a fear-based way. So if we do want to talk about whatever the latest disease is or whatever the latest conspiracy theory is, we're going to talk about it in a way where we say, actually, what's the spiritual significance of this, and how is it helping the world? Or how is it that we can take action ourselves to make the change that we'd like to see, rather than just everything's miserable, everything's screwed up, you can't trust anyone, bye. We don't want that. And there's plenty of that out there. And we already know that that's what attracts the masses. I like to call the news that you watch on TV every day the How I Could Die show. If you think about it, when you sit down to watch the news, oh, there's a hurricane, oh, there's a fire, oh, there's a murder, oh, there's the latest disease, oh my gosh, we're all screwed. Why do people watch that? Because they're in the survival mindset. Ooh, I have to know how I'm going to possibly die. I have to make sure that I don't get murdered. I have to make sure I don't get into a traffic accident and the next hurricane, the next tornado, and make sure my windows are solid or whatever, right? Because that makes us feel comfortable. It's a temporary relief of fear. So, oh, okay, these are all the ways I could die. As long as I prevent that from happening, then I'll be good. It's this endless search for safety. And really, as these human beings, we are never really safe, but yet we are infinite, so we are always safe. So we don't really have to worry about that so much. And of course, I don't watch the How I Could Die show because I'm not worried about how I could die. I am excited about how I can live. And so I don't need to see that anymore. And that's really what I'm trying to create with incredible content creators and incredible management team that's putting this together.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like a really wonderful platform, and I do hope that it catches on and people will be able to really enjoy it, especially after they come home from work, or if they're working from home, they'll be able to detach from their standard routine of life and to get that inspiration and the empowerment that you're seeking to share with others.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
thank
Yeah,
you.
oh, I'm sorry to interrupt you. And it's funny because you said detach, right? You want to detach from all these things that are wrong. And that the negative entity attachment program that I teach, that's the name of it, detached. We're going to detach you from entities. We're going to detach you from PTSD, depression, or negative or implants, or on and on. So I love that as the name, because what we want to do is flow with the world, flow with ourselves, and flow with all the possibilities that we've come here to discover. And that allows us to actually discover them.
Well, thank you, Xane, so much for coming onto the show here. Where can our audience contact you if they'd like to see your work more?
So there's many ways. I definitely my Facebook account, which is easy to find because Xane Daniel with an X, there's nobody else like that. But at the same time, XaneDaniel.com, definitely a great one. The righteouscomic.com and cosmictelevision.com.
Okay, thank you, Xane. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming on to episode 35 of the show here. It's been a really fun conversation. Anyone who wants to connect with Xane, please do so. Gonna like the episode, share it with your friends. We do this because we love what we do. And I just will want to promote this one thing. Our show today is sponsored by Merlin's Lab. So they make orgonite pyramids. This one is a medium tourmaline size when there's crystal quartz in there. And it's a beautiful device to have at your home, whether you're spiritual or you just like really unique artwork. It is a multifunctional tool. So we have one of these here, as well as a turquoise and lapis lazuli one. They're beautiful works of art. and functional devices. And you can find them at merlinslab.myshopify.com. And also the links that Xane has mentioned about how we can contact him will be in the description below. And any other links that I've mentioned or talked about will also be there. So check out all of that, and everyone will see you on the next episode. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.